Hey guys, I am going to talk to you today about these three awesome books. We're going to look at My Name Is Not Friday. We're going to look at The Letter Writer by Anne Rinaldi. The first book was by John Walter. And the third book is called Stolen into Slavery, The True Story of Solomon Northup, Free Black Man. And this is by Judith and Dennis Fraden. This was actually created from the movie 12 Years a Slave. So I'm going to start with My Name Is Not Friday. So the main character's name in this book is Solomon. Now Solomon and his brother Joshua are orphans, and they live in an orphanage as free young black boys. Solomon's brother is constantly getting into trouble, and Solomon feels like he has to protect his brother because since they're orphans, he's the only family member that Solomon has. And so he's always doing whatever he needs to do to keep Joshua out of trouble. Well, one day, this horrible thing happened, a prank happened, and you'll have to read the book to find out what it is. It's pretty bad. And so the priest of the orphanage was convinced it was Joshua and was going to punish him. Well, Solomon took up for his brother, and he admitted doing this horrible prank. But of course, he didn't do that. And the consequence of this prank was the head priest sold Solomon into slavery. Because back in the 1800s, slavery was a huge money-making system. Slaves were very expensive to buy, and once someone purchased a slave, they felt like they had to protect their investment. So if you had a slave to sell, you could make a lot of money. The healthier and the stronger a slave was, they got more money. Or if you had a female slave and she was able to have children who could then become your slaves as well, she was worth more money. So anyway, a lot of people don't realize that the slave industry was a huge money-making industry. But anyway, so back to Solomon. So Solomon lost his freedom. He went to this farm, and he worked there on a plantation. Actually, the young boy of the house purchased him, and the young boy was actually pretty kind. His father was very sympathetic towards slaves, and so this young boy wanted to be like his father. And so he was very sympathetic, and he actually treated Solomon more like his friend than his property, which is a good thing. However, the young man, Jared's stepmother, she wanted Jared to be much more strict and treat Solomon as property rather than a friend. One of the things that happened as soon as he was sold into slavery, the man that sold him changed his name to Friday. And so for years, he wasn't called Solomon anymore. And so that's the reason the book is called My Name is Friday. Well, Solomon, throughout the whole book, all he wanted to do is get back. First of all, he wanted his freedom back, of course. And the other thing he wanted to do was to find out where his brother was. And so as he became more and more courageous, he started telling people what his real name was. And he finally was able to say out loud, my name is not Friday. Toward the end of the book, we find that Solomon does find his brother. A lot of things happen to him throughout the book. And at the end of the book, we have this sense of hope. If you see the screen there, 40 acres and a mule is something that was promised to freed slaves after the Civil War. And so you're going to have to read the book to figure out what happens. But a lot of twists and turns in this book. It's a great read. I think I read it in about 3 days. And it gives you a lot of information about this young boy named Solomon and his drive and his passion to find his brother and take care of his brother. All right, so that's the first book. The second book is called The Letter Writer by Anne Rinaldi. And this book is actually about a young girl named Harriet. She's 11 years old. And she is the daughter of a slave owner, or many slave owners. It was a wealthy family, so they owned a lot of slaves. Well, the mistress of the property of the plantation, she was losing her sight, and so Harriet was given the task of writing letters for the mistress. And so through this campaign of writing letters for the lady that ran the plantation, she found out a lot about information that she wouldn't have been able to know about if she wasn't given this role. Harriet was very sympathetic to the slaves that worked for her family. She believed that slavery was wrong, that no one should own these people, and she did everything she could to make life for the slaves in their home more comfortable. And in fact, most of the families in this book did treat the slaves as well as they could have, considering that they were considered property at the time. But one day, Harriet learned about this well-educated, very talented, well-spoken slave named Nat Turner. Well, it was unusual for a slave to be able to read. In fact, in the South, it was against the law for any slave to be taught how to read. And if you were found with a book or a pen, you could be beaten severely, because that they knew that if someone could read and they could find out information about their rights and how important it is to fight for freedom and liberty, that it would get these crazy ideas into slaves' heads that maybe they shouldn't be property and they should fight for their freedom. Well, like I said, Nate Turner became friends with Anne's girl that, kind of took care of her. And Harriet was so interested in Nate Turner that she wanted to meet him. And so she actually did meet him. And she actually gave him something that ended up helping Nate Turner get together a group of slaves, and they actually rebelled against their slave owners, and they went from plantation to plantation and actually killed people. Not all, mostly white people, but not just white people, Black people, men, women, and children. Now, like I said, Harriet blamed herself for contributing to this plan, and I'm not going to tell you why, but you're going to have to read the book. It's a great book. It's very well written. The characters, you feel like you know who they are. You feel like you are sympathetic to both sides, the owners, the slave owners in this book, and the slaves themselves, which seems so like that shouldn't happen, but the author writes that in a way that you really feel like you know the whole story from both sides. And it leaves you questioning why Nate Turner did what he did, because he never had any indications of violence any time in his life ever, except for this time in history. And of course, this is a historical fiction book because that actually did happen. Nate Turner is a real man, and the people that he killed were from this farm that this book is about. So it's just a great, great, great read. I really encourage you to read that book. So finally, the third one is Stolen into Slavery, the true story of Solomon Northup. So similar to the first book, Solomon was born in New York State, and he was born a free man. So at the time, it was before our country, it was before all of the northern states had outlawed slavery. So in New York State in particular, the law at the time was if your mother was a free person and she had children, those children would be free. But if the mother was born into slavery, her children would be slaves as well. Well, Solomon was born as a free man, and he lived in New York for his whole life. He was 32 years old. He had a job, he had a wife, he had kids. And like I said, the slave trade was a very profitable business. And so he was actually tricked, and he was kidnapped and this is a true story. This really happened, and all of the information in this book, it has been verified. And like I said, it was the movie 12 Years a Slave. It was about Solomon Northup. So anyway, so imagine being born a free person like we all are, and then someone tricks you and then kidnaps you, and you become a slave. And he was a slave for 12 years. And he had several different masters throughout that time, but the last master, the one that owned him the longest, treated him very horribly. And if you read his story, you just won't believe what all this man had to endure. And yet for those 12 years, you know, he wanted to escape. All he could think about was reuniting with his family. He never lost hope, although he became at times, you know, just overwhelmed and thinking that he would probably never see his family again, and it just crushed him. However, because he was educated, he could read and write, he was able finally to get back to his family. But just to be able to read his story, true accounts of what he went through, it'll break your heart, and it'll also just let you realize the true evils of slavery. And you really need to remember these stories. You need to know who Solomon Northup is. You need to know his story. You need to know all of these stories. So I encourage you guys to read these books. They're all great books. You will enjoy them. And just let me know if you do, and let me know what your opinions were on them. All right, you guys, thank you for listening.